Welcome back to our year-end special, The Battle Over Bridge Safety, 5 years and counting. You know, politics plays a part in almost everything, and when it comes to bridges, New York, no exception to the rule. While RFL was recognized by the New York Bridge Authority for bringing call boxes to upriver bridges, downriver, the Tappan Zee Bridge presented a different challenge and a whole other cast of characters. You see, the TAP, as most locals call it, is not operated by the Bridge Authority, but instead by the New York Thruway Authority. Thus, different agendas, different budgets, different political alliances, and very different ideas when it comes to call boxes. That will become quite clear in a minute. But first, after nearly 30 recorded suicides in the previous 10 years, in which time the Tappan Zee, a well-known landmark, came to rival the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco as a spot where the desperate and depressed chose to end their lives. Well, those in charge of the TAP finally had to face the problem as well as the facts. And indeed, we thought they had when, after pushing for months, the former head of the Thruway Authority, Ramesh Mehta, finally agreed to an interview right here on RFL. Here is what Mr. Mehta had to say.
Judging from the experience what they had on the Mid-Hudson Bridge, I think there were 74 calls since 1986 or 1984, and only one person jumped. So I think it had some impact on the people who use the call boxes, and this is what we think, that if we have it on the Tappan Zee Bridge, that may impact also. One lost life is too many, and if we can, with the whatever expenditure is, this is very, very nominal expense,
right?
And if we can save one life, that will be great.
But were that only the end of this part of the story? As our timeline continues, we move to mid-2007. Well, we discovered there were now indeed call boxes on the Tappan Zee Bridge, which had already claimed a staggering number of victims. The placement of the special phone line seemed more of a bureaucratic bungle than a true effort at saving lives. A desperate person wouldn't find those boxes just where they were most needed. Here again, Regina Orsanya.
The Tappan Zee Bridge has become more than just a way for commuters to get across the Hudson River. For some desperate souls looking for a way out, it has become a convenient place to end their lives. Over the past decade, more than 30 people have jumped from the span, not surviving the 130-foot drop. Some have called for deterrents like barriers or fencing, anything that might convince a suicidal person to think twice. Joan White, who lost her daughter Stephanie to the bridge's deadly allure, told us in 2007 that her death came as a shock.
So when my husband came with the detectives to tell me that my daughter was dead, it didn't register.
Sleepy Hollow's Fire Chief John Korzelius and his rescue team have spent countless hours on the Hudson, searching for victims who have jumped from the Tappan Zee. He told us recovery efforts can cost up to $10,000 every time a person jumps. He believes anything that could stop them from taking that fatal plunge would be worth it.
Anything to help somebody, give them that extra second to think about it, they may change their minds. There's a good possibility it just may change their mind.
And at the time, Westchester County Commissioner of Mental Health, Dr. Grant Mitchell, agreed.
Certainly in bridges where those systems exist, they have been effective in reducing suicides. I mean, that's what the data shows.
After RNN started covering this issue, the New York State Bridge Authority announced it was installing call boxes on 4 of its bridges. Not long after, the New York State Thruway Authority followed suit and added call boxes to the Tappan Zee Bridge. But there was a big problem. The call boxes were put on the approaches to the bridge, almost 1.5 miles away from the center of the span itself, where history shows more people tend to jump. A step in the right direction, but clearly not enough.
With a documented 30 lives lost, many would probably agree certainly not enough was being done to save lives. But the Thruway Authority, they didn't see it that way, and so once again, we move ahead. Now this is the holiday season, December 2008. More than a year after interviewing the former head of the Thruway Authority, Ramesh Mehta, right here in the studio, he was back defending what some victims' families might rightfully describe as the indefensible. But you don't have to take our word for it. Listen to Mr. Mehta that December evening 3 years ago in his defense of these misplaced call boxes and decide for yourself. You take a look at where these are, just as a scope of this, the middle of the span where both people jumped last week. More than that, look at the distances where people, if somebody wants to pull over the Mid-Hudson Bridge that you called a success story, they have those call boxes on the center of the bridge. You have them in some cases 2 miles from the bridge. Obviously not the logical place where someone would go for a lifeline right before they take a leap.
I think it is very, very logical because we have high volume traffic, high speed traffic. We have no shoulder, we have no pullover for the vehicles. We can't actually install the phones right on the span because it will be safety hazard for so many other people who cross the bridge.
Well, let me just remind everybody, because
Sure.
Karen spoke to you
Yes.
about this issue before, and since that interview ran, we've gotten a lot of calls, and I want to give everybody a frame of reference as to what sparked some of this conversation. Again, this was your conversation with Karen Dept
Are
this week.
stopping. I know you don't want to encourage people to stop to use the phone, but if they're already stopping and they're already, you know, getting out of their cars there, wouldn't it make sense to put a phone there to save, just to possibly give them a second chance?
No, but you know, I explained you that if the people are following here, the car, if he suddenly stops and he wants to use the phone, it can be dangerous for the people who are sitting in this car. It is good that we could save his life, but it will be safety hazard for the people who are following in the car.
The argument that if you have a phone there, people are going to stop the car. No one's going to pull over a car for fun because they're driving 40 miles an hour and they see a phone on the side of the bridge.
People can actually, they can actually mistake the phones for a helpline. Like if there's something wrong with the car, they may mistake that.
You cannot make this stuff up. Well, still to come on this special edition of RFL, the battle over bridge safety, 5 years and counting. We're going to move ahead again. We're going to put names and faces to some of the suicide victims from the Tappan Bridge. And we'll move into yet another year with a story of a young woman who seemed to have it all, fame and fortune, but instead chose to make her final exit from the Tappan Zee. RFL sat down with the victim's sister, her emotional story of love and loss, when we come back.